I thought I was the luckiest man alive. My wife had saved my career by finding me this high-paying job. But today, I realized I wasn't just driving a billionaire. I was driving my wife's other husband. She told me our house was foreclosed. She told me we were broke. It was all a lie to turn me into their personal servant. And this is how I found out my entire life was a script written by the woman I loved. And the ending? It's something you won't believe. The first time I saw my wife kiss another man, I was sitting 3 feet away from her with both hands on the steering wheel. Rainwater slid across the windshield in slow waves. The wipers dragged back and forth with a tired rubber squeak that sounded older than the car itself. Somewhere behind me, crystal glasses clinked under a white tent lit like a movie set. I remember the smell first. Wet leather, expensive cigars, Sarah's perfume. The same perfume that had still been on my pillow that morning. Mr. Blackwood stepped out of the backseat without looking at me. He adjusted his cufflinks under the glow of the driveway lights while guests drifted across the lawn in dark suits and pale dresses. Then Sarah appeared at the front entrance of the Hamptons estate. Not in jeans, not carrying folders from a property showing, not exhausted from another late-night client dinner. She was wearing a black silk gown I had never seen before. The kind of dress you don't accidentally own. Blackwood walked toward her through the rain. And in front of 50 people, under strings of white lights trembling in the wind, he wrapped an arm around her waist and called her Mrs. Blackwood. Not Sarah. Not my agent. Not my associate. Mrs. Blackwood. I kept staring into the rearview mirror because my brain refused to look at them directly. Then Sarah lifted her eyes toward the SUV. Toward me. She didn't look shocked. She smiled. A small, calm smile. Like she'd been waiting for me to finally understand something. That should have been the moment I left. Instead, I stayed parked outside the house for another 4 hours. Because by then, I already suspected the truth. What I didn't understand yet was why she wanted me there to see it. Or why my name was already printed on the guest security list beside theirs. Family staff. 3 months earlier, my world had already collapsed quietly enough that I almost missed it. Bankruptcy doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small humiliations. Return calls. Frozen accounts. Clients disappearing after years of promises. My architecture firm had survived 11 years in Manhattan. Then one commercial project failed, followed by another. And suddenly I was sitting in an empty office listening to fluorescent lights buzz above half-packed cardboard boxes. Sarah carried us through most of it. That was the story I told myself. She worked luxury real estate across New York and Long Island. High-end properties. Wealthy clients. Weekend showings in the Hamptons. Flights to Chicago twice a month. She always smelled like hotel air conditioning and expensive lobbies when she came home. Cold perfume. Coffee. Dry cleaning steam. I used to think it meant success. Our apartment got quieter after the bankruptcy. Not hostile. Just careful. Sarah became softer with me after I lost the company. Too soft sometimes. She touched my shoulder more. Asked if I was sleeping. Left envelopes of cash inside kitchen drawers like she didn't want me to feel embarrassed. One night, while the refrigerator hummed through the apartment and traffic hissed below the windows, she told me one of her clients needed a private driver. Temporary work. $10,000 a month. She said the client trusted her judgment more than contracts. At first I refused. Then I checked our bank account again around 2 in the morning while Sarah slept beside me facing the opposite wall. 3 days later, I was driving for Mr. Nathaniel Blackwood. The first thing he ever said to me was strange enough that I replayed it for weeks afterward. My wife says you're reliable. Not Sarah says. My wife. At the time, I assumed he meant it casually. Rich people talk differently. They referred to assistants like family. Employees like possessions. Still, something about it stayed with me. Mostly because Sarah had never mentioned he was married. Blackwood traveled constantly between Manhattan, Chicago, and the Hamptons. Most drives were silent. He liked low jazz playing through the speakers at almost inaudible volume. The SUV always smelled faintly of cedarwood and cigar smoke. Sometimes there were lipstick marks on crystal water bottles left in the backseat. I noticed details because driving gave me nothing else to do, and because I'd spent years studying structures. Architects notice patterns for a living. The first real crack appeared inside the glove compartment. I was looking for registration papers after a traffic stop in Midtown when I found a lipstick tube wedged beneath a stack of parking receipts. Matte silver casing. Tiny scratch near the cap. I knew that lipstick. Sarah ordered it from Paris twice a year because she claimed American stores never carried the correct shade. When I got home that night, her lipstick was missing from the bathroom drawer. She told me she'd lost it during a showing. I believed her for another 6 days. Then I found the keychain. A silver half-heart beneath the rear passenger seat. I nearly drove onto the curb when I picked it up. 10 years earlier, before we got married, I'd bought matching keychains from a tourist shop in Boston during a snowstorm. Sarah kept hers on her old apartment keys for years. She once cried when she thought she'd lost it. Now half of it was under another man's seat. The SUV suddenly felt airless. I remember gripping the steering wheel while the heater blew dry heat against my face. My pulse sounded louder than the turn signal. When I got home, I checked our bedroom drawer where Sarah kept spare keys. Her half of the heart was gone. That night, I started watching her. Not openly. Just small things. How she angled her phone away now. How she showered immediately after getting home. How she smiled at messages she never answered in front of me. Then something worse happened. One afternoon, while waiting outside Blackwood's office tower downtown, I checked the navigation history looking for a gas station route. A saved destination appeared near the top. Oak Ridge Lane. I knew the address instantly. Our old house in Connecticut. The house Sarah told me we'd lost after the bankruptcy. Except the navigation history showed repeated visits. Weekly. Sometimes overnight. I drove there 2 days later without telling anyone. The house wasn't abandoned. The lawn was trimmed. The porch lights glowed warm against the evening fog. And parked inside the driveway was Blackwood's Rolls-Royce. I sat across the street for almost an hour with the engine off. The old wind chimes Sarah bought years ago still hung near the porch. Then the front door opened. But it wasn't Sarah who came out. It was a little girl, maybe 6 years old, dark hair, bare feet, holding a stuffed rabbit. She looked so much like Sarah that my stomach folded in on itself. A second later, Blackwood appeared behind her and carried her back inside. The porch light shut off. I drove home shaking so badly I missed my exit twice. Sarah returned around midnight smelling like rain and hotel soap. She climbed into bed carefully, thinking I was asleep. Then her phone vibrated once against the nightstand. A message preview lit the dark room blue for half a second. Thank you for tonight. Emma finally slept. Emma. I didn't know any Emma. But I knew the little girl's face. By then, I thought I understood the story. It felt ugly but simple. Sarah was having an affair with Blackwood. Maybe it started through work. Maybe after my business failed. Maybe she stayed with me out of guilt. Everything fit. The late nights. The secret properties. The hidden visits. Even the little girl made sense eventually. I convinced myself Emma was Blackwood's daughter from another marriage and Sarah had become part of their life. The explanation hurt, but at least it was human. People cheat. People drift. People stay for financial reasons. I could survive that version. So I started collecting proof. Not for revenge at first. For certainty. I photographed receipts left inside the SUV. Hotel reservations under Sarah's initials. A Cartier bracelet invoice sent to Blackwood's assistant. Then I found something stranger. A property transfer document. Not recent. 7 years old. The scanned paperwork appeared briefly on Blackwood's iPad while he took a phone call in the backseat. I only saw it reflected in the rearview mirror for a few seconds. But I recognized the address immediately. Our Connecticut house. Transferred from Sarah Mitchell to Nathaniel Blackwood. 7 years earlier. Long before my bankruptcy. Long before I became his driver. That night, I broke into Sarah's locked filing cabinet while she was away in Chicago. The metal lock snapped easier than I expected. Inside were tax records, real estate contracts, passports, and 2 sealed envelopes. One envelope contained photos. Sarah, Blackwood, the little girl, Christmas mornings, beach vacations, birthday cakes, 7 years of family photographs. In half the pictures, Sarah wore a wedding ring I had never seen before. The second envelope contained a marriage certificate. Sarah Blackwood. Date issued 7 years earlier. My chest went cold. Because 7 years earlier, Sarah and I had already been married for 2 years. I sat on the floor until sunrise with papers spread around me while the radiator clicked softly through the apartment. The affair story disappeared completely. This wasn't cheating. This was construction. An entire second life built beside mine with architectural precision. And somehow I had lived inside it without seeing the walls. After that, every memory started changing shape. I stopped sleeping. I started recording routes, saving timestamps, tracking flights. Patterns emerged quickly once I stopped viewing Sarah as my wife and started viewing her as someone managing operations. Chicago trips always aligned with Blackwood's travel. Financial transfers moved through shell property companies Sarah controlled. The bankruptcy dates matched withdrawals from our business accounts I never authorized. Then I found the worst part. The bankruptcy itself hadn't destroyed my company. Someone had slowly drained it first. Client emails rerouted. Payments delayed. Vendor contracts canceled from internal accounts. The access logs led back to a device registered under Sarah's old business laptop. At first, I refused to believe it. I spent an entire night in the apartment kitchen staring at spreadsheets while the microwave clock blinked 3:14 a.m. over and over after a power surge. I kept waiting for another explanation. There wasn't one. Sarah hadn't adapted after my collapse. She engineered it. But even then, one question still didn't make sense. Why hire me? If she wanted another life, she could have divorced me years ago. Instead, she kept me close, dependent, watching. Then Blackwood answered that question accidentally. We were driving back from Manhattan late one night. Rain hammered the roof hard enough to blur the bridges into streaks of white light. Blackwood had been drinking. Not sloppy, just careless. He mentioned how Sarah hated loose ends. Then he laughed quietly and said something I couldn't stop thinking about. She said you'd stay loyal if you still believed you were protecting her. Protecting her from what? I started digging deeper. And finally I discovered Emma's birth records. Father, Nathaniel Blackwood. Mother, Sarah Blackwood. Emergency contact listed beneath both names. Mark Mitchell. My name. Not husband. Not guardian. Emergency contact. Like a backup system. Then another document surfaced. A trust agreement. If anything happened to Blackwood, substantial assets transferred into accounts managed jointly by Sarah and me. That was the first moment I understood I was never outside this arrangement. I was built into it, carefully, legally, psychologically. The realization made every room feel smaller. Even the apartment no longer felt real. The framed wedding photos, the shared furniture, the routines, it all looked staged. Then came the invitation to the Hamptons party. Blackwood handed it to me directly. Heavy cream-colored paper. Family summer gala. Driver access included. My name already printed beneath theirs. The party felt unreal from the moment we arrived. String lights swayed above the lawn while ocean wind carried salt and cigarette smoke through the property. Jazz drifted from hidden speakers near the pool. Women in white dresses laughed too loudly beside fire pits. And everywhere I looked, people knew Sarah. Not as a realtor, as Mrs. Blackwood. Staff greeted her by name. Guests kissed her cheek. Photographs of her and Emma sat framed throughout the house, not hidden, displayed openly. I realized then that the secret existed only for me. I wandered through the mansion in a numb haze while servers moved around carrying champagne trays. Then I entered Blackwood's office and saw my own face staring back at me from a monitor. Security footage, hundreds of clips, me entering buildings, me leaving banks, me driving routes, timestamp for years, cabin cameras, garage cameras, apartment hallway cameras. Someone had been documenting my entire life. A folder on the desktop carried my name. Inside were psychological evaluations, financial reports, behavioral notes. One line appeared repeatedly through dozens of files. Subject responds positively to dependency reinforcement through marital attachment. Subject unlikely to leave voluntarily. My hands went cold against the desk. Then I found the final document. A non-disclosure agreement. Signed by me. Dated 9 years earlier. I stared at the signature for almost a full minute. Because it was mine. Real, not forged. And suddenly something buried very deep inside my memory surfaced. A hotel conference room in Chicago. Blackwood across a table. Sarah beside him. A proposal. Not for employment. For participation. I remembered my failing firm. The debts. The panic. I remembered agreeing to help Blackwood hide assets through architectural shell companies in exchange for financial protection. I remembered Sarah telling me it would only be temporary. Then I remembered something worse. The second marriage hadn't been hidden from me originally. I knew. At the beginning, I knew everything. The arrangement was supposed to protect all three of us financially. But years passed, and somewhere along the way, Sarah and Blackwood stopped treating it like a contract. They became a real family. Meanwhile, I became unstable after the bankruptcy pressure, the investigations, the drinking. Therapy records inside the folder described dissociative episodes. Memory suppression linked to alcohol abuse and stress. Sarah didn't erase my life. My mind did. She simply allowed the false version to continue because it kept me functional. Safe. Controllable. Predictable. That should have been the final truth. But there was still one more file. Video footage. Recorded 2 weeks earlier. I watched myself sitting in Blackwood's office calmly discussing transportation schedules and financial transfers. Perfectly aware of everything. Perfectly coherent. Then the version of me on the screen looked directly toward the camera and said something that hollowed me out completely. If I forget again, don't tell me until the Hamptons party. I need to see her choose him myself. I watched the recording 3 times. I had already known. Again. And I had planned the revelation myself. Not to expose Sarah. Not to escape. To punish myself. Because some part of me still needed to watch the life I helped build continue without me. Later that night, Sarah approached the SUV after the guests moved inside. Rain tapped softly against the hood. She leaned toward the driver's side window with the same calm expression from the beginning of the night. No fear. No triumph. Just exhaustion. I finally understood why she looked relieved when our eyes met in the mirror. This wasn't the first time I had discovered the truth. It was just the first time I remembered asking for it. I drove them to the airport the next morning. And I still work for them now. Every Friday, we go back to the Hamptons together. Emma calls me Uncle Mark. Sometimes I almost believe that's all I ever was.